A mountain valley does not love the woman who keeps its light. It notices her exactly once, on the night the light is not there. Below the pass at Corinfell, the carters pay a levy of 2 coppers a cart, and one keeper on a spur of bare rock burns it, a jar at a time, in an iron basket above 1,000 feet of nothing. When a burning mountain throws ash over the pass for 4 days, and something comes down blind in it and cannot get back up, the valley sends no help. It stops the road, sets a watch at the washout, and makes certain nobody climbs. What the keeper does instead costs her every jar she owns, and puts her tower out on the busiest night of the season. Then for 30 nights, the light above that valley burns brighter than any oil she ever bought, and not one drop of it is oil. The ash had been coming down on the pass road for 4 days, before anybody understood what it was hiding. It came dry and gray off a burning mountain 2 ridges east that nobody in the valley had ever walked to. It settled on the switchbacks in a soft gray fur that took the print of a boot like new snow. On the 4th afternoon, the carters shut the road themselves, at the washout where the 9 turns begin. That much was sensible. A mule will not climb a grade it cannot see. What they did the next morning was not sensible. 3 of them had heard the thing come down in the dark onto the wide stone shelf under the beacon's spur. One described the noise afterwards as a barn falling into a quarry. It had not gone up again. So the council met in the oil house and decided, on behalf of every soul in the valley, that the road would stay shut. The watch above the washout would face uphill. One person on that mountain could look down onto the shelf from her own doorstep. Wren Ashlock, keeper of the pass beacon, was not sent for and was not asked. I want that named correctly, because Corinfell called it Caution afterwards, and went on calling it Caution for years. Caution faces the danger. That watch faced the mountain. It was set there to make certain that whatever had come down on the shelf died on the shelf. Alone, above a road nobody was allowed to walk. She heard none of it. She was 33, and she had kept that beacon for 9 years. It stands 1,000 feet above the road on bare rock, with nothing on it but a squat stone tower, an iron fire basket, and her. What she noticed was the quiet. In the 9th week of the season, there should have been 14 carts a day grinding up under her. On the 5th morning of the ash there was not one, so she went down over the lip to look, on the hauling line she used for her oil. The ash slid under her boots. The light came up hard and blue behind her. It was lying on the shelf. It was as big as a barn and the color of wet slate. The great plates down its back ran with a dull orange seam between them, like a fire banked low for the night. It was not bleeding. It was not thin. Nothing on it was broken that she could find. It had crawled perhaps 40 feet from the gouge where it landed, dragging 2 troughs through the ash with its forelimbs. Then it had put its jaw down flat on the rock and stopped. Both eyes were shut. They were shut wrong. She went down on one knee, at a distance she could still run from, and looked at the head. The lids were sealed along their whole length by a crust the color of dry mortar. Ash by itself is only dust. Ash on the wet of an eye stops being dust. The eye of a large animal weeps all day to keep itself clean, and here that weeping was the entire disaster. The water came out through the lashes, took up the ash, dried in the wind, and set hard. Then more ash came down on it, and more water came out under it, and it set again over the first layer. By the 4th day that crust had the thickness of a thumbnail, and near the hardness of a fired tile. It had glued the upper lid to the lower one from corner to corner, on both sides of the head. You need to understand what that does to an animal of that size, because everything after this stands on it. It is not a wound. a wound has an edge. You can find the edge, wash it, pack it, and know inside 3 days whether you have won. This has no edge anywhere. It cannot be cut off, and it cannot be pulled off, because the lid comes away with it. And under the lid is the one part of a beast like that which is soft. Cold water will not touch it. It beads on the stuff and runs away down the scale without wetting it at all. Warm water held against it, wet cloth after wet cloth, hour after hour, is the only thing that lifts it. It lifts about the thickness of a page in a night. All the rest is patience. And a blind animal on a rock shelf with 1,000 feet of air on 3 sides does not walk out, and does not hunt, and does not go home. It lies where it is, and waits to stop. She sat back on her heels in the ash, and worked it out in the flat manner she used for weather and rope and distance. Warm water on that mountain meant boiled water, and boiled water meant fuel. There is no wood above the wash out, and there has not been a tree up there in living memory. Everything that burns above Corn Fell burns oil. Every drop of it sat in sealed clay jars under her own tower, and not one of those jars was hers. They belonged to the road. Then she stood up, and her boot turned to stone, and the head moved. Not fast, an inch and no more, bringing the blind side of its face around toward the sound. Then it went still again, and it waited. It did not lift. It did not open its jaw. "I know," Wren said. "I can see it. Stay where you are." She climbed back up in the last of the daylight and lit the beacon, because that is what a keeper does at dusk, whatever else the day has held. Then she stood at the parapet with her hands in her sleeves and finished the arithmetic she had been refusing to finish since noon. A beacon keeper's ration is the dullest document in that valley, and the most exact, and nothing in this story works without it. The carting season on the Corran Road runs 80 nights, from the first hard frost to the morning the council closes the pass. Every cart that goes up pays 2 coppers at the wash out into the road fund. The fund buys fire oil in the autumn and sends it up in 4 deliveries, 20 at a time. The keeper burns a jar a night, full dark to first light. 80 jars is 80 nights. There is no 81st jar. Beyond the ration she must buy at 8 coppers, and her whole fee for the year, 4 silver crowns, buys 30 nights of oil. She was paid exactly enough to do the work and not one measure over. The night she found the animal was the 20th of the season. She had burned 20 of them. 60 stood in their straw under her floor. She cut up 2 shirts and a bolster case on the tower step that evening. She did it slowly. A woman about to spend everything she has likes to be sure of her own hands first. The burner she cooked on drew from the same jars as the basket. A pot held hot on it, hour after hour, ate a jar between dusk and midnight. So the price was fixed before she started. A jar in the basket for the road, a jar under the pot for the eyes. 2 out of 60 every night, for as long as 60 lasted. She went down on the 21st night with the pot wrapped in a fleece. The cloths went in a sack across her back, and her brass lamp swung from the crook of her elbow. 40 minutes down, better than an hour back up, and all of it in the dark. The beacon was lit, and the beacon was what the dark was for. She laid the cloths steaming across the crust, and held them there with the flat of her hand and her whole weight behind it. Steam came off the cloth and off the plates of its jaw, which were hot enough to dry a wet sleeve. When a cloth cooled, she swapped it and wrung it out and put it back. She talked while she worked, in the flat voice she used on frightened mules. "That's the 3rd cloth. It's coming, but it's coming slow. You'll want to be still for me. At the 4th hour, she got a strip of softened crust off the outer corner of the left lid, no bigger than a thumbnail. The skin under it was gray and creased and unhurt. "That's one," she said. "That's the whole of one." Then she carried the cold pot home in the dark, chalked her count over the door, and slept 4 hours. On the 4th night, the men at the washout saw a lamp go down over the edge of the beacon spur, where no lamp had any business going. One of them sat on the rope post and counted the hours until it came back up. Master Galt came up on the 6th morning of the washing, with 2 carters behind him. He had led the council since before she took the beacon he was past 60, and he would not come in through her door. He asked whether she was going down over the edge at night, and she said that she was. He asked what was down there. She told him plainly, an animal not sick and not hurt, with ash set on both its eyes like mortar on a wall. Warm water is the only thing on earth that lifts it. Then he asked the question he had climbed up to ask, which was whose oil? The road's oil burns in the basket, full dark to first light, every night since the frost, she said. The road has had every hour it has paid for. Say me the night the ration runs out. I will say it back to you, and we can stand here and agree about a thing that has not happened yet. He did not say the night. He stood on her step and looked up at the basket burning over his head in broad daylight, which is what a beacon does at the end of a shut season. The 2 carters looked at anything except her face. Then the 3 of them went back down. Here is the fact this whole story turns on, and I want it in front of you now. Corin Fell never once considered it, and the warden would not write it in his book. Every night she knelt inside the reach of a mouth that could have taken her off that shelf without altering its breathing, and it never once opened its jaw. Not to yawn, not when the crust tore on the 3rd night, and something ran out of the corner of the lid and froze on the scale below. Not when she put her whole weight on a cloth because the stuff would not give. Twice it drew its head back from her hands, 6 inches, slowly, and waited until she had set her feet again, before it came back. An animal in pain snaps, and the snapping is not malice, it is arithmetic older than anybody in that valley. The thing on the shelf had decided something about her before she ever came down with a pot. It held that decision for 30 nights, and she never knew a decision had been made. She thought it was manners. She chalked her count before she slept, on the same flat stone over her door where she had written weather and cart tallies for 9 years. On the 4th night of the washing there were 52 jars under her floor. On the 10th night there were 40. She wrote the numbers the same size she had always written them, and stood in front of them a little longer than she used to. The crust came off the left side first, in pieces no bigger than a thumbnail, and then in pieces as wide as a coin. Under it the lid was gray and creased and whole. By the 16th night, with 28 left in the straw, that lid was clean. The eye still would not open. The lashes themselves were cemented in a line along the join, and lashes are finer work than lids. You will keep still for this part, she told it. This part is slow, and I have nothing to do it with but water. By the 22nd night there were 16 jars left. She had stopped sleeping properly. She began to be careful on the rock face in a manner she never had before, because a woman who has not slept puts her foot in the wrong place. The road opened again on the 44th night. The ash had blown off the switchbacks. The carters had had enough of a shut season with the pass closing in 5 weeks, and the council took the ropes off the washout. 14 carts went up under her on the first day, and 13 came down, every one by the light of her basket. Not one driver looked up at it. Nobody looks at a light that has always been there. On the 48th night there were 4 jars left. That was the morning she went down to buy with her own money. The woman who kept the oil house had known her 9 years and would not meet her eye. There was a paper on the counter with the council's mark on it. No oil beyond the ration was to be sold up the spur, while there was a beast on the shelf. The council would not have it said that the valley had paid to keep the thing alive. Wren put 4 silver crowns down, the whole of her fee for the year, and the exact price of the 30 she needed. The oil-house woman turned the paper around so that it faced her, which was a kindness of a sort, and the only one on offer. "I know what you have in your hand," she said. Wren read it twice, because she read everything twice. Then she went back up with her money still in her fist and her hands shaking, and it was not from the climb. On the 49th night there were 2 jars left, and on the left side of that great flat head the lashes had begun to part. She stood in front of the cold basket at dusk, on the 50th night, with a jar in each hand. Below her the road was open and working. 2 lanterns were already moving on the second turn, and every driver on that mountain was steering by a light that was about to have nothing in it. A jar in the basket and a jar under the pot bought her a lit road and half a night of hot water. Half a night of hot water would not finish it. 2 jars under the pot finished it. She carried both of them down, and behind her the iron basket stayed dark for the first time in 9 years. She took the burner down that last time, and the pot, and every cloth she owned. Water carried 1,000 feet down a rock face loses half its heat, and she had no half to lose. She set it on the flat stone by its jaw, lit it, and put the first jar in. That little blue ring of flame was the only fire on the whole mountain. She worked the lash line from the inner corner outward with a cloth folded over her thumbnail, wetting and waiting and wetting again. She counted out loud, because counting is what she did with fear. 4th cloth. It is giving. Do not move for me now. At the 11th cloth she heard the road. Sound travels a long way up a rock face on a still night. She heard a mule refuse, which is a noise like a door in a wind. She heard a man swear twice, and a woman's voice after him, high and level. Then came the long grinding scrape of a cart being backed down a grade by people who could not see the edge of it. On the 4th turn, where the drop is worst, a driver who had come up that road 400 times put a wheel off the shoulder. He lost half a load of winter meal into the dark. Nobody went over with it. They cut the traces and walked the mules down by hand, palms on the rock. Every cart on that mountain turned round and went back to the washout, to wait for a light that was not coming. She heard all of it. She did not go up. That is the cost of this story, and I am not going to soften it. She knelt on a stone shelf with her hands in a pot of hot water and let the road below her fail. A thing that could not see was 6 hours from seeing, and the oil to finish it was already burning. At the 2nd jar the wind dropped, as it does on that pass in the last hour before light. At the 40th cloth the lash line parted. It came all at once, after a month of coming a page at a time. The upper lid slid back off the lower one with a sound she felt through the cloth rather than heard, and the eye underneath opened. It was amber, and clean, and as wide across as a dinner plate, and it was the brightest thing on that mountain. It moved once, twice, finding its focus, and then it stopped on her face, and stayed there. Wren Ashlock sat back on her heels in the ash with a wet cloth in her hand, and said nothing at all for a while. "That is one," she said at last. "That is the whole of one. The other side will be quicker. I know the work now." The other side took until the sky went pale. When it was done, she had 2 open eyes on her, a pot of grey water, and an empty jar on its side by her knee. Over her head was a dark tower with cold iron on top of it. She put out her hand, as you do to a horse you have finished with, and stopped it 6 inches short. There are things you do not do even at the end of a long night. The animal looked at her. Then it looked at the pot. Then it lifted its head, for the first time in a month, and looked up past her at the tower, with nothing burning in it. The valley came up at 9 in the morning. There were 11 of them in Master Galt at the front, and this time nobody stood politely outside the door. The road was dark, he said. It was. He told her what a dark road costs, and the units a council keeps. 2 carts turned back at the washout, half a load of winter meal off the 4th turn, and a driver who could have gone over with it. 17 carts standing below his hill that had to be over the pass before it closed. There was no oil, Wren said. You had oil. I had 2 jars, and 1 night, and it needed both. For that, she said. It has eyes this morning. It did not have them yesterday. Galt looked at her a long moment, and she watched the thing arrive in his face that she had been dreading for 30 nights, which was not anger. It was pity, which is what a valley reaches for when it has decided you are no longer reliable. The council will have the beacon off you, he said. Not out of spite, because a road cannot be kept by a woman who will put it out for an animal. She did not argue, because he was not wrong, and there is no argument against a man who is not wrong. The 11 of them went back down. She spent that gray day on her own step, with a dead lamp in her lap, counting what she had left. A stone tower that was not hers, an iron basket she was about to lose, and 4 silver crowns nobody in the valley would take. At dusk on the 51st night, she went up onto the tower-head out of habit, because that is when a keeper lights the basket. There was nothing to light it with. She sat down on the parapet with her back against the cold iron, and her brass lamp held in both hands. Its wick was black. It was the only unlit thing she had ever been ashamed of. Below her, the 9 turns filled with lanterns, as the carts came up to the washout and stopped. That is as far as anybody goes on that road without a light above them. She did not sleep. Sometime in the small hours, she heard stone move on the shelf below, then a long dragging scrape on the rock face itself, then a weight coming up the spur that she felt in the parapet under her hands. She could see nothing at all, because there was no light on that mountain to see by. Then the cold came off her back, and the stone under her went warm, and the whole dark turned the color of a forge. She turned round on her knees. It was on the tower. It had come up the spur and over the parapet, and folded itself around the iron basket as a cat folds around a warm stone, forelimbs braced on the outer wall, tail down the far side, head over the basket at exactly the height a keeper's head hangs when she is lighting it. The seams between the plates, banked down to a dull orange for a month, had opened. The whole animal was running with light. The empty iron glowed cherry red from the body wrapped round it, and the heat off that tower head was the heat of a smithy at noon. Below, the 9 turns of the Corran road were gold from the wash out to the summit, every wheel rut, every stone, every set of ears on every mule. And the carts were moving. She stayed where she was, on her knees in her apron, the dead lamp in both hands, and the empty jar on its side by her knee. She did not get up. For once there was nothing at all that needed doing. That was the trade, and it took her most of the day to see it whole. She had spent her light to buy its sight. It was spending its body to buy her light back. Neither of them had asked. Neither of them had been thanked. The carters counted the nights before anybody else, because drivers are counters by trade. The 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, they took to running the pass after dark on purpose, since that road at midnight was better lit than the same road at noon. On the third day the valley came up the stair, 20 of them, with rope and a pole hook and 2 boar spears, and Master Galt in front with his hat in his hands. I do not believe he knew himself whether he had climbed up to thank her, or to have the animal off her tower. They got as far as the top step. It came down off the basket and laid itself across her doorway, jaw flat to the rock, both eyes open, between 20 people and 1 woman in an apron. It made no sound at all. Wren, Galt said, "Call it off. It is not mine to call." She said, "It never has been. I washed its eyes. That is all that happened up here. The man behind them was not from the valley. Grey coat. Mule left at the washout, a green ledger under his arm, Warden Thrale, pass warden of the signal chain, 3 days up from the watch-house below." He did not look at the animal for anything like as long as you would expect. He looked at the basket. "That basket is cold," he said. "It is. How long?" 4 nights. He opened the ledger on the parapet and ran a finger down a column, reading out what the watch-house had entered against her. The Corran beacon burning on the 49th, missing on the 50th, burning on the 3 nights since, at a strength the watch-house had written down twice, because the first entry was not believed. "There is no oil drawn against those nights," he said. "No jar, no requisition, no levy. A light on the imperial chain that nobody is paying for is a false signal, and it costs a keeper her post, her ration and her name in this book. Then come and look at what is lighting it," she said, "and write that instead. I am trying to decide what is lighting it." He asked the questions a warden asks, and she answered in the units of her trade. How much oil to a night? How much to a pot held hot for 6 hours? How far down the face? How long a climb? How many cloths? What weather? 20 people listened to a woman price out a month of her life in jars and hours and thumb-widths of crust. None of them said a word. Put in that manner, it does not sound like devotion. It sounds like a bill. Then the warden put his hand out toward her door to go in and count the empty straw. The animal moved its head 4 inches and set it between his hand and her. That was the part Corran Fell talked about for the rest of its life, not the gold on the road. The 4 inches. The warden turned the ledger over to the front board, where the seal is, and studied a seal he must have looked at every day of his working life. Then he looked at the animal on the doorstep, and back at the seal, and his face came apart. At the foot of the stair, standing in the ash in the cold, was a man who had not come up the road. Nobody heard him arrive. He was plain and grey-coated, and no older than 50, with nothing in his hands and no horse behind him. The tower head above him was empty, and the iron up there was already going from cherry to black. Warden Thrale went down on one knee on the step, with the ledger still open. He said the word that had not been said anywhere in this story, in a voice that carried down all 9 turns. He said Emperor. He came up 11 steps, and no further. He looked a while at the cold basket, and at the empty jar lying where she had left it 4 days before. Then he asked her one question, and it was not about himself. What does the ration buy? 80 of them. 80 nights, Wren said. Nothing for weather, nothing for spillage, nothing over. He told the warden to write that down, and the warden wrote it on his knee. Then he told him to enter the Corran beacon as burning on the Crown's own account for the nights in question, and to read it aloud at the watch-house himself. That was all he did on the mountain. He did not offer her a house, or a purse, or a place at any table, and he did not ask her for one thing. He was a bystander to a decision already made without him, on a shelf of rock, in the dark, by something that never once opened its jaw. Then he walked down on foot, alone, past 20 people who could not make their legs work, and the pass closed the next morning, and the season ended. She kept the post. A council does not take a beacon off a woman whose name is written in a green book under a seal, and Galt, to be fair to him, never asked it to. In the spring the road fund bought 90 instead of 80, and said nothing about why, which is the only apology a Stone Valley knows how to make. The 30 nights ended when the pass closed, and she had counted every one in chalk over her own door, in the same hand she used for weather. After that, at dusk, all through the next season, she carried her jar up onto the tower head and found a long, dark shape already lying along the parapet. Jaw on the rock. One amber eye half shut. It took up the whole south wall and steamed faintly in the cold. She lit her own basket with her own oil every night, because that is the job and she had never wanted anybody else to do it. It lay there anyway, and she worked around it as she worked around her own doorframe. She never named it out loud. Not to a carter, not to the warden, not to the council. Not once in her life. Strangers pulled up dead on the 4th turn and shouted up to know what that was on the beacon. She told them it was the beacon, and went back to work. After a while the drivers stopped asking and learned to swing wide at the top of the stair. So when the corn carters tell this, they tell you about a tower that burned for 30 nights with nothing in it. About the gold on the road, about the man in the grey coat at the bottom of her stair. All of that happened. I do not think any of it is the part that matters. The part that matters is a woman on her knees on a cold shelf with both hands in a pot, letting a road fail below her 6 hours from an eye. So which is the story? The one night a keeper spent the last of her light on an animal that could not thank her, or the 30 nights an animal spent its own body paying her back,